and get started. Give me one moment, please. There we go. Okay. Welcome, everyone, and good afternoon to this Metropolitan Washington Air Quality Committee meeting. I'm your chair, Kenny Bodie, for those who may be new to the committee or may be tuning in for the first time. As we usually start off our meetings, we will be starting with public comment time. I'd like to ask members who join virtually to enter your name and affiliation in the chat as well. So anyone who's virtually, I will do the same, enter your name and your affiliation. So what jurisdiction you're from, your agency title, what have you. Staff will use that for attendance. As a reminder, please mute yourself when you're not speaking, and you're encouraged to use the chat function to share with members in today's meeting. Also, please note that this meeting is being recorded. I'd like to ask committee members in the room with us today to identify themselves. So again, please, as we move along, actually, I'll do that. So anyone, how many folks do we have in the actual conference room?
Oh, we have 2 members here.
Right, if those folks could identify themselves, please.
Good afternoon. It's John Morrill from Fairfax County.
Tom Denoga, Prince George's County.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Thanks for sounding off. And now at this point, we'll be moving to public comment time. Interested members of the public will now be given the opportunity to make brief comments on air quality related issues. In order to accommodate all who've registered, we have quite a few this time around. Comments will be limited no more than 2 minutes, and there will be a timer. Anyone who's online can see it. So please adhere to the time limit. We will start with Tad Auburn, Cheverly Area Environmental Justice Action Team.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Tad Aburn. I'm one member of the Environmental Action Team. I believe Julia Mosley is going to introduce this comment. Julia, are you able to speak? If not, I'll continue. There's a group of folks, a partnership in the Cheverly area, been implementing environmental justice program for about 4 or 5 years. It has air monitoring. It has a partnership with MDE to reduce emissions. It has a great effort to build the partnership, engage with the community, build capacity in the community, and it's showing results. I think that's the most important thing. We're actually seeing air quality improve in the Cheverly area because of the hyperlocal network that's been established. The partnership includes not only University of Maryland, but Prince George's County and the University of Maryland. And it does focus on specific things using existing authority that's already in the MWAQC SIP to reduce diesel emissions, to reduce toxic emissions and other emissions from stationary sources like metal shredders, aggregate plants, asphalt plants, and then to reduce toxic fugitive dust that comes from traffic, roadways, all sorts of other things. There have been many comments submitted by many people. I think about 50 people from Cheverly submitted comments about being supportive of this. What we hope happens in the MWAQC action plan is that you use the MDE efforts as a guide for further action, that you look at the University of Maryland experience in terms of setting up the monitoring networks. And finally, you take a long, hard look at the way zoning and land use planning works, because if we continue to dump dirty businesses into the same communities over and over again, the problem is just going to get worse. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our group would love to be helpful. We're anxious to provide more detailed information. There's many written documents, some from MDE on this effort. Please take advantage of this offer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Aburn. Appreciate your work. Next, we have, and excuse me if I mispronounce your name, Shizuka Haseya from Trinity Washington University.
Hi, Chairperson and members of the committee. Thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Shizuka Shea. I am known as Zooks to Communities, with whom I work And those are some neighborhoods in Washington, D.C. that have concrete batching, diesel trucks coming through, and odors from industry, odors and toxics from industries that are, on right there next to homes. And so I applaud all of the efforts and thoughts that are going into having community-based monitoring that empowers residents with data. But I also want to encourage that call for action that we just heard about, that we can actually use data to enact cleaner air now. And I mean this especially for families that are having children who have been next to industries since they've been in utero. So please, please do not let the call for data and the need for data and the be a way of delaying action. We see this happening right now in Ivy City in Washington, D.C., where there's a facility right next to a home. And we continually hear that there's a need for more data. So in terms of immediate action, allowing unpermitted facilities to continue going, that's not acceptable. Permits should contain mitigation plans and also targeted enforcement. And I encourage government agencies to work with the district itself to reduce emissions through the district's own activities, be it from garbage trucks to getting electric powered buses. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Ms.
I'm
Shea.
done.
Yeah, appreciate your comments, appreciate your work. Next, we have Russ Dickerson from University of Maryland.
Good afternoon. I am Russell Dickerson, a professor in the Department of Atmospheric and Oceanic Science, the University of Maryland College Park. We have been making measurements and running models of air quality in the Baltimore, Washington area for decades. Most recently, we have gotten into the problems of environmental justice, especially black carbon. I was actually quite agnostic about environmental justice until Zooks, who just spoke, asked to borrow from us a black carbon monitor and put it in Ivy City, and the results were shocking. So since then, we have made a lot more measurements. We have a mobile lab. We drive around Baltimore and Washington, and there are many neighborhoods that have high concentrations of black carbon and other pollutants. So we have found them, not all of them, but we found some of them. These problems of hyperlocal air quality, environmental justice are real. We can quantify them, and they are deserving of action. So the diesel emissions are an important, but not the only source. So I urge this committee to think about further measurements, but don't use that as an excuse to avoid taking action to abate some of these more important sources. I'd be happy to answer technical questions if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dickerson, and thank you for bringing that to our attention. Next, we have Raymond Mosley from the Cheverly Area Environmental Justice Action Team.
Good morning. Thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah, we're getting some feedback, Mr. Mosley. Do you have multiple devices up for this?
Yes.
All right, we'll give you a couple of seconds to resolve that. There you go. Okay.
Okay, there you
No
go.
problem. Ms. Mosley's gonna be okay. I will give both of you your full time, but yeah, please start over, Mr. Mosley.
Thank you for the opportunity. This will be very brief. I did submit written comments, and Tad, of course, summarized our team effort here. Just a special plea on behalf of our children. Many of our children ride school buses every day. When they get on those buses in the morning, they get an extra dose of black carbon. When they go out to play at recess in the middle of the day, particularly in our area, they get another extra large dose of black carbon. Then when they get on the school bus to go home, they get yet another third large dose of black carbon. We need to protect our children. Please take that into consideration as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mosley. Ms. Mosley, you're up.
Okay, thank you. My name's Julia Mosley. I'm a 50-year resident of Cheverly, a former mayor and council member, and I'm joined in this statement by Layla Riazi, also a former mayor. Our community and adjoining communities are overburdened by air pollution in general. We need help and protection. Since 2020, Cheverly and surrounding communities have been part of an EJ partnership working to clean the air. These communities include Cheverly, Fairmont Heights, Seat Pleasant, Cedar Heights, and other overburdened communities impacted by air pollution sources, emissions from trucks, cars, buses, stationary sources like metal recycling and aggregate plants are overwhelming. This partnership, which includes, as you've heard, the University of Maryland and Dr. Jacoby Wilson's group, and the Department of the Environment, Maryland Department of the Environment, have been working very hard on these issues. As you develop your plan, I urge you to allow public comment at all meetings and subcommittee meetings, hear from real communities, and most of all, adopt an action-oriented EJ plan. Build from the successes and struggles like our organization has had. We would be happy to work with COG staff to ensure that you have access to the knowledge and experience we have gained in our partnership. And this has been just a terrific partnership of area communities, state and county agencies, private citizens, and we thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Ms. Mosley. Next, we have Ms. Tanae Lewis.
Yes, good day. Give me 1 second. Good day, members of the Metropolitan Washington Air Quality Committee, COG, and other interested stakeholders. Thank you for the opportunity today. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today in support of the MWAQC, Environmental Justice Action Plan. My name is Tanae Lewis. I am a volunteer and advocate for the Campaign to Reduce Lead Exposure and Asthma that is a coalition member of the DC EJ Coalition. I am testifying today to make sure that the MWAQC EJ Action Plan focus on real comprehensive actions to reduce emissions in EJ areas ASAP. It is crucial to involve communities and other committee members of the public as MWAQC finalizes and implements the EJ Action Plan. This impacts communities, especially residents with respiratory diseases like asthma that live in high-risk, overburdened communities who need this plan to protect them from the environmental pollutants which exacerbates their illnesses. I speak today on behalf of those residents who are unable to be here, and thank you for hearing my testimony and considering my input to make an equitable and aggressive EJ Action Plan.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis, for your testimony. Next, we have Casey Mignune from the town of Cheverly.
Thank you very much. I prepared a statement, Mr. Chairman, on the committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to provide comments. My name is Casey Munyane. I'm the mayor for Cheverly. I'm also the president for the Maryland Municipal League Black Caucus and a board member with the Maryland Black Mayors. Cheverly and our surrounding communities have been a part of this partnership focusing on clean air for a few years now. The partnership targets a large area where the community is overburdened by numerous air pollution sources. As I'm sure you may know, Cheverly is surrounded by industrial zone. So we get emissions from trucks and cars and stationary sources. Some stationary sources that are actually supposed to be trucks and cars because we have idling vehicles, as some of you may know. We also have metal recycling and aggregate plants. All of it's overwhelming. The partnership has included the University of Maryland. We're very grateful for that partnership with Jacoby Wilson's group, MDE, and Prince George's County. One of the things I'd love to ask you to do as you consider the plan is to encourage significant public participation, which you've already heard today. Hear from real communities like us. We are actually impacted by the air quality every day. and ensure that whatever plan you have is action-oriented. In our partnership with MDE, we are already implementing community-focused programs, such as the Air Quality Monitor program. I actually have one of the air quality monitors on my home. On a personal note, not only do I have the air quality monitors in my home, but I also have an air purifier in every room to combat the pollution. I don't have to tell you how minority communities suffer so much from having unclean air. So in closing, I urge you to adopt a strong, action-oriented EJ plan that begins with working with the community and listening to our voices. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you so much, Madam Mayor. Thank you for your advocacy and for your service. Next, we have Karen Moe, Cheverly Area Environmental Justice Action Team.
Thank you for this opportunity to provide comments on the Environmental Justice Action Plan. My name is Karen Moe, and I'm a 40-year resident of Cheverly and a member of our EJ Action Team. My comments focus on the critical role that community-based air monitoring networks play in a successful plan to reduce air pollution in our overburdened communities. In 2019, I volunteered to be the Cheverly liaison to University of Maryland to implement a community-driven hyperlocal sensor network monitoring PM 2.5 at schools and homes in Cheverly and neighboring communities. The network has over 20 sites, and University of Maryland is continuing to expand in the neighborhood. In 2021, MDE produced a baseline report on the Cheverly air quality, and the network is used to target and implement emission reduction actions. In 2023, Cheverly is a community partner with MDE and UMD and awarded a $500,000 EPA grant to expand the network monitoring VOCs. This year, UMD installed black carbon monitors, and the community members are closely monitoring the data. The network is a great example of community empowerment, citizen science. Our partners at MDE and UMD have been amazingly helpful. My recommendation is for the Environmental Justice Plan to establish a regional support center to help fund and build community-based hyperlocal air monitoring networks in EJ communities across the region. Federal funds are available. Local universities can help. I'd be happy to share my experiences. Thank you.
Ms. Moe, for your testimony. Next, we have Layla Riazi from the Cheverly Area Environmental Justice Action Team.
I believe that Ms. Riazi was not available to come today.
Okay. Give me 1 second. All right. Understood. We will then move into Mr. Anthony David Jr. from Empower DC.
All right. Good afternoon, Chairman and committee members. My name is Anthony David Jr. I am the environmental justice organizer with Empower DC. For the past 2 decades, Empower DC has been dedicated to advance racial equity within Washington, DC. It was a great concern that I emphasized the urgent need to address environmental justice issues. I commend MWAQC's commitment to adopting a robust action-oriented EJ plan. Much like many cities across our nation, the district has a long history of injustices of air quality related to the siting of industrial sites and major roadways. Neighborhoods like Brentwood and Ivy City have been smothered with noxious chemicals emitting from the district government and private facilities. Both of these neighborhoods are located in Ward 5 of DC, which holds 50% of DC's total industrial land. The cumulative impacts of these industrial sites have dire consequences for the health and well-being of residents. When thinking about the scope of Brentwood nationally, these residents are in the 89th percentile of low life expectancy, and the community has more hazardous waste facilities than 96% of the US Census tract. We need not only plans, but actions that truly address the long history of injustices related to air emissions. In Ivy City, like Zooks mentioned earlier, we are dealing with a chemical facility called the National Engineering Products, who have been in operation since the 1930s without any local air permits at all. To this day, this facility was specifically targeted in a historically Black neighborhood who uses cancer-causing chemicals banned by the EPA, such as acetonitrile, phenols, methylene chloride, and formaldehyde. Our district agencies and the EPA have been dragging their feet with any type of enforcement for this facility, which is rooted in our unjust and racist policies. As the Metropolitan Washington Air Quality Committee moves forward with this plan, I urge the incorporation of the following crucial points. Inclusion of provisions aligned with the Environmental Justice Amendment Act of 2023, introduced by DC Councilmember Zachary Parker, looking at cumulative exposures to multiple air pollutants from various sources, particularly prevalent in EJ communities, and development of enforcement for bad actors, because we are lacking enforcement through our policies. Facilitation of substantial public participation, ensuring public comments at all meetings and EJ subcommittee meetings, centering and amplifying effective community voices, action-oriented strategies utilizing existing regulatory tools and programs to significantly reduce emissions in EJs.
But please wrap it up. You are out of time.
Okay, well, I guess I'll leave it at that. Just making sure that we are making sure that our plans are action oriented and really looking at impacted communities within our region. Thank you.
Understood. And if you have any further comments, you can submit them in text format as well, so we can get the rest of what you wanted to say. Thank you so much, sir. Next, we have Latricia Adams from Young, Gifted, and Green.
Good afternoon, members of the Metropolitan Washington Air Quality Committee. My name is Latricia Adams, founder, CEO, and president of Young, Gifted, and Green, formerly Black Millennials for Flint, White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council appointee, where I serve as the co-chair for President Biden's historic Environmental Justice Executive Order 14096, and I am a proud Ward 5 resident in Washington, D.C. I am here to provide preliminary recommendations to improve air quality and public health outcomes in our region through a robust environmental justice action plan grounded in the 17 principles of environmental justice and the Hermes principles. As a top priority, I urge this committee to incorporate cumulative impact assessments as a standard practice in the proposed EJ action plan. Too often, the impacts of air pollution are evaluated in isolation, failing to account for the compounding effects on overburdened communities. By adopting a cumulative impact framework, you can better identify and address the disproportionate air quality and health burdens faced by low-income areas and communities of color. I also recommend that the committee develop robust public-facing air quality report cards. These report cards should track key metrics like criteria, pollutant levels, asthma rates, and pregnancy and birth outcomes, providing transparent accountability to residents. Exposure to fine particulate matter and other pollutants during the critical developmental stages of life can have lifelong consequences, leading to increased risk of preterm birth, low birth weight, and impaired cognitive function. This information should be widely disseminated throughout community events, digital platforms, and partnerships with local organizations like Young, Gifted, and Green. By centering the health of our most vulnerable populations, you can drive meaningful improvements in air quality and public health. Thank you for your time and consideration this afternoon.
Thank you, Ms. Adams, for your advocacy and for your comments. That is our last public comment time speaker that I'm seeing. So we will conclude public comment time. Thank you so much to everyone who signed up and spoke to us today. Your comments have meaning, and we will definitely take them into consideration as we move forward with our work. We will now move forward with our first formal order of business, which is to approve the meeting summary from the February 2024 meeting. Does anyone have any changes they want to make based on what was sent out by staff? Hearing no changes, can I please entertain a motion to approve the meeting summary?
Shayna Fulcher, City of Tacoma Park. So moved.
Thank you. Can I get a second, please? Thank you so much, Ms. Glass. Good to hear from you. Any discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed or abstentions? All right, the ayes have it. Thank you so much, everyone. Let's begin the committee reports. First, we have the MWAC Technical Advisory Committee. Roger, you have the floor.
Yeah, this will be short because MWAC was canceled, TAC. There is no update.
I like it. Next is the Air and Climate Public Advisory Committee. Julie, the floor is yours.
Chair Bodie. I'm Julie Kimmel, ACPAC Chair. I have 3 updates for you today. First, ACPAC launched the 2020 Climate and Energy Leadership Awards program on Earth Day. The awards program began in 2014 as a way to highlight governments, NGOs, and educational institutions in the region that have implemented innovative climate stewardship projects and programs, particularly those that engage and serve the region's underserved communities. This year, we are awarding 2 jurisdictions in the government category. We'll award a small jurisdiction with a population of 90,000 people or less, and a large jurisdiction with a population of over 90,000. The NGO and educational institution categories will still have 1 award each. If you know of any climate stewardship projects and programs implemented by governments, NGOs, or educational institutions, please alert COG staff Leah Boggs to send them information about programs. Second, MWAQ's EJ subcommittee kickoff meeting was held on May 2nd, as I'm sure you all know. There are 3 ACPAC members on the subcommittee, including me, Vice Chair Bill Washburn, and Reverend Jacqueline Norris. You'll hear more from COG staff and the consultant later on in the agenda, but I'll say that Bill and I passed along some experts in environmental justice and air quality to subcommittee staff, and we hope they will be consulted and even brought before the subcommittee at one of our meetings. We're looking forward to some fruitful collaboration in this space. And finally, ACPAC has developed a list of air-related recommendations that we want this policy board to consider implementing. I will highlight a few of the recommendations, but you should have the full memo in your packet. MWAC should do more to monitor air pollution in hotspot areas and alleviate the pollution burden on communities in these areas. And also continuously track the impacts of wildfires and other external factors on regional air quality and make adjustments to the committee's work in order to better protect public health. The committee worked diligently on these recommendations and had robust discussion to reach this final list. At our meeting on Monday, the members in attendance voted unanimously to advance them to this policy body. We also developed a list of climate-related recommendations for CPC to consider. A memo was presented to CPC this morning. The committee asks that MWAC seriously consider these recommendations, and please reach out to me directly for questions and discussion. Our next meeting is July 15th, and that's all I have. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Kimmel, as always, for your report back and all your work on both ACPAC and now under the EJ subcommittee. Next, we have the Clean Air Partners. Jen, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you so much. Clean Air Partners kicked off their summer campaign during Air Quality Awareness Week, which was the first week of May, with the launch of a gas-powered lawn equipment exchange event that will take place across the metropolitan Baltimore, Washington area. Residents were able to register to bring in their gas-powered equipment into participating Ace Hardware stores in exchange for new electric equipment. And the equipment that was made available for exchanges included lawnmowers, weed trimmers, and leaf blowers. And all of the gas-powered equipment will be taken to a recycling facility to be disposed of properly. The exchanges, we have two weekends that are dedicated to the exchange. And the first one was this past weekend, the weekend of May 18th. And then we have a weekend coming up, the weekend of June 1st. And this is when the exchange is available for residents to come into those Ace Hardware stores. Now, in addition to the actual exchange, it was also accompanied by Clean Air Partners Backyard Bubble events, which includes an exhibit to educate the public about ways they can reduce emissions related to lawn and gardening. With the program itself, we are anticipating exchanging approximately 125 to 150 pieces of equipment, and we also currently have a wait list of over 100 registrants. Upcoming, the month of August will be designated as Ozone Action Month. And that month, we will be traveling around the Baltimore, Washington region with our interactive eco-driving exhibit, and that will all focus on ways to reduce vehicle emissions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jen. Appreciate it as always. Next, we're going to hear on the CPC report. Jeff, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Bodie. CPC met this morning. The main item on the agenda, the action item, was adoption of the work program and budget. The meeting then turned to a pretty lengthy set of presentations on solar. So we heard about the DC and Virginia Solar for All program, which is an exciting new program that's deploying lots of solar across the region and statewide in Virginia and Maryland as well. We then heard from a representative from ICMA, the International City and County Managers Association, on the Department of Energy Soul Smart program, which is a best practice program for kind of government processes for solar, so permitting, zoning, those kinds of things. And finally, we heard a really interesting presentation from Rachel Healy, who's the Sustainability Director from WMATA, on all the good things WMATA is doing related to climate, energy, and sustainability. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff, as always. Now that concludes our committee reports. I know we're a little bit behind schedule, but we'll kind of try to crank through this as quickly as possible. Next, we have our ozone season update. Mr. Kumar, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will hope everybody can see the screen properly.
Yes, we can.
We can. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so I'll be talking about the air quality data that we have seen thus far in this season. We took a look at the ozone and fine particle 2.5 in particular. So in this chart, in this slide, you are looking at the daily peak 8-hour average ozone levels in parts per billion, or in short called ppb. As you can see, there are three tables here. They're referring to March, April, and May months of this year. And as you can see, this individual cells show the numbers, 8-hour, they are daily 8-hour maximum average ozone levels in parts per billion. And they are color coded. So green means good air quality, and you're seeing a few yellow, that means a moderate air quality. Fortunately, we didn't have any code orange or red or purple, anything like that so far in this season. We still have June, July, August, and some parts of September when we usually see incidences or code orange or worse air quality. But so we're keeping an eye as we move along this season. So as you can see here in this slide, most of the days were good air quality, just a few in moderate season, moderate level. So this slide shows the trend in the ozone accidents days, and this relates to the current ozone standard, 70 parts per billion, which was published in 2015. The slide shows historical data trends starting from late 90s until this year. And the individual bars show the total number of accidents days in different years, as well as, and you'll see the number of code orange or red or purple days in each of these years. And as you can see, overall, there's a pretty good downward trend. We are not able to only reduce the number of ozone accidents days, but we also are able to reduce more concerning code red and code purple days. As you can see, the progress has not been very smooth, and there have been bumps along the road, but overall, we have made tremendous progress in reducing ozone levels in our region, starting from late 90s until now. We have made pretty good progress until we hit last year in 2023. You can see there is a jump in the ozone exceedance days, and we're up to 15. 14 were code orange, one was code red, and that was mainly due to the contributions from the precursors that traveled along with the smoke generated by wildfires in Canada. And if you remember, there were quite a few days when we had those smoke-influenced, air quality in our area. So those, they're definitely a big component of those precursors coming from along with the smoke, hit our area and raised our ozone levels. So. In 2024, as you can see, there is no exceedances so far. Well, as I said, I will be keeping an eye on that. This is a chart which shows the trend in the ozone and temperature. And the reason we show this relationship is because temperature is very important factor in ozone levels. The other factor being emission. And in this chart basically shows you a historical trend in that relationship between the two parameters. The purple line shows the number of extended days. The red line shows the number of 90-degree and above days. And usually historically, when the temperatures are with 90-degree and above, we have seen exceedances. So that was the reason we saw this relationship here. As you can see on the left side of the vertical line, which shows a different regime where we used to see many more exceedance days compared to the number of 90-degree days. And the reason was the emission levels were so high that it didn't even take 90 degrees to cause an exceedance. Compared to that, on the right side of the line, you're seeing just the positive relationship where the number of exceedance days are much lower compared to the number of 90-degree days. And the reason is again the same. Emission levels have now reduced to such an extent that we don't necessarily see an exceedance when the temperature hits 90-degree or above. So this shows that emissions have declined and to a big extent, and that's a progress. This shows another trend in other parameters. It's called ozone design value. That design value is based on 3 consecutive year worth of air quality data. And again, you can see over the years, we have made good progress in reducing the design value. After 2015, the kind of line has flattened. But we did, attain the standard in 2021. And then again, we maintained that progress in 2022. But because of those fire that generated a smoke, and through all the precursors of ozone our way in this area last year, the number inched up and went back above 70 at 71 parts per billion. And the result, we went back into kind of non-attainment with respect to the current ozone standard. This data again is preliminary. And then fortunately, there is a process exists in Clean Air Act, and EPA would allow us a waiver of the smoke influence data. And the states are currently in the process of requesting, they already actually requested that process to take over. It's called exceptional events exemption. It will allow EPA to take the smoke influence data out of the calculations, and this would put the region back into attainment again when that happens. This is for fine particles. This is for daily average to 24-hour fine particle levels in microgram per cubic meter. As you can see, except those 5 days and code moderate or code yellow days when the air quality was moderate, the rest of all days were green. And this is considering the fact that we have now a tougher annual PM 2.5 standard at 9.0 microgram per cubic meter that became effective on May 6, 2024. So all the numbers here are based on the new standard. And even with the new tougher standard, you can see there are, most of the days were actually code green. So this again shows a pretty good progress made even on the PM 2.5 front. This shows the trend in the PM 2.5 exceedance days. As you can see, just like ozone, we have also made tremendous progress, and which is visible here. in many of the years. You can see there are no accidents that is at all, bunch of zeros on the, you're seeing on the chart here, until again 2023 when there were 8 accident days and 5 of them were code orange, 3 of them code red. It was all basically due to the smoke influence that, smoke that came our way and brought all those precursors of not only ozone, but fine particle as well, that resulted in all these accidents. But once, again, this is a trend in the annual PM 2.5 design value. So PM 2.5 has 2 standards, one on annual basis and other is on a daily basis. So as you can see here, there are 2 lines showing the 2 different standards. Now the standard has been tightened from 12.0 microgram per cubic meter down to just 9.0. And as you can see, we have again made tremendous progress in reducing the design value parameters for PM 2.5. Right now we are at 9.0 at even with those smoke influenced days included in it, which is right at the boundary. So we have to watch again very carefully how this season goes. So we will be keeping you updated as the season progresses in next few meetings. This is for the annual PM 2.5 design value trend. As you can see, this trend, the standards hasn't changed since 2006. It's still at 35 microgram per cubic meter, and our data varies now between 20 and 22 for last few years, which is much below the standard. So we are okay on this front as well. So just to summarize in the status as far as the ozone is concerned, just to kind of give you a quick background, our region was designated as a marginal non-attainment area for the current ozone NAAQS in August 2018, which is the lowest level of non-attainment you can have. Since area could not attain the standard by the deadline, area was reclassified to moderate, which is 1 notch above the marginal level. And that's where it is currently now. The current 2023 draft data shows that we are still in non-attainment, but that is mostly due to the smoke originating from wildfires in Canada. States have requested EPA to grant the waiver for that smoke influence high ozone days. Once that happens, we will be back into attainment again. If EPA, we are expecting that EPA will give us a waiver, and in anticipation of that, we will start. We have kind of started to lay the groundwork for a maintenance plan. Once EPA grants us the waiver, then the states will, request EPA to redesignate the region back to attainment. And when they do that, they will have to also submit a maintenance plan, which will demonstrate that the region will keep attaining the NAAQS even in the future. So we started to kind of lay the groundwork for the 2 documents, and we'll start seeing those efforts taking in June this year, when we'll start, discussing on a preliminary basis for the maintenance plan and the redesignation request in the MWAQC Technical Advisory Committee. And we'll keep you updated. We'll keep this committee updated as well in the next few months and years. Also, one important thing I wanted to bring up here is that thus far we have been providing just one forecast for air quality forecast for both ozone and PM 2.5 for the entire Metro Washington region. However, now we decided, the region has decided to split into 4 separate forecasts for 4 separate regions. As you can see here in different colors, and the forecast sub-regions are called Maryland, Piedmont, and then you have NOVA and North Virginia and districts, Southern Maryland and suburban DC, and the associated counties or part of counties are also listed here in the chart on this map. So the reason we decided to split this particular region into 4 sub-regions is that it will help us provide more accurate forecasts that will reflect the local conditions. So, starting this season, we have switched to this particular way of providing forecast for the region. That's all I have. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Sunil. As always, appreciate the concise but very detailed report back on this update. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Kumar?
I have some questions.
Go for it.
This is Tom Dranoga, Prince George's County. In listening to the public comments, there were a number of questions that came up. I just emailed this to the officers and the staff, so not everybody got this. But in looking at the exceedance and the SIP attainment, non-attainment, I know we have a series of meters spread around the metro region. I recall seeing a list at various times. I don't recall all of them, but as I recollect, failure at any one meter is failure for the day. Now, my question is, who's responsible for selecting the sites for the meters?
So is the criteria, there is a criteria that EPA has provided to the states, and the states will work with EPA to kind of meet all those criteria for citing those monitors. So there is number of criteria that that is needed to be fulfilled before states can actually locate a site for these individual monitors, either for ozone and fine particles, but they're also for other pollutants. So it's EPA and states working together based on the criteria.
Okay, I'm not going to go through all my questions. I can wait for those to be answered. But what strikes me is if we have a lot of members of the public speaking about micro area pollution, and we have meters scattered around the area that are not showing that, should we be looking at relocating some of the meters to some of these areas, or are the meters measuring different air pollution elements? And the issue is the pollution that's being referenced is not part of the attainment plan, and is something, a different air pollution element. In other words, not ozone, not the PM 2.5. I heard black carbon, which I'm not a scientist, that doesn't mean anything to me. But what I hear is we've got air pollution in micro areas, and we have meters that aren't picking that up. So is it the meters? Is it what we're measuring? Can we move the meters? Those are the general questions.
Interesting set of questions, and I should add also the notion of the states running the near road monitor. So there's yet another type of monitor that's out there that's not officially used for attainment, determination, but as a monitor. And I think the short answer to your question is it's a combination of all of that. In some cases it's a different pollutant, in some cases it's a different meter technology, different purpose. But I think clearly there's a difference between the official monitoring network that EPA and the states manage for attainment of ozone and the criteria pollutants under the National Ambient Air Quality Standards versus some of these hyper local, legitimate air quality concerns, but they're a different kind of category than the NAAQS, the official NAAQS.
Well, it would seem to me, we had a professor from Maryland speak. We have other technical people speak. Most of the Air Quality Commission members are political folks. So, I commend anyone who understands this in detail, but I don't. But as a commission member, in terms of deciding policy, and particularly the Environmental Justice Subcommittee, I think we need a memorandum that explains here's where the meters are and why, here's what they measure and why, and here's why we have hyper-local issues and what we can do about it. I mean, otherwise, we're not doing anything. We know we got problems, so what's the technology or the legal analysis that lets us use technology in a way to address that? So I think that'd be very important. I'm not sure how long that would take to analyze or to provide a memo, but it would be nice before the next EJ subcommittee meeting.
And I can't speak to Jen and the work program budget. I'm assuming that we can have the budget and staffing to do something like that.
A layperson, it's a layperson's version, not a text.
So I think we could do it. We would certainly need the assistance of the state folks because they have a really much more detailed and intricate understanding of it than certainly I do. I know I could benefit from the memo you're talking about.
Yes, I think we can certainly work with the states who manage these air pollution monitors. We can probably bring their folks who manage that and have a presentation.
Great, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the questions.
No, absolutely. And those were good questions. I appreciate the dialogue. And just underscoring the fact that we do have a lot of folks that have differing levels of familiarity with these monitors, differing levels of involvement with the committee, what have you. But I think it's a very salient point that would be great to get some kind of report back at some point from staff on the monitoring that is done, how that feeds into our work, and how we can best utilize them. Because I agree 100%. If we have monitors out there, but they're not capturing the cogent data, or they're not capturing data in the areas that we know are most impacted, there's something to be talked about there. But we need to know what we don't know first. So I appreciate that. I think I saw Dave Snyder. Did you have a hand up?
Yeah, I did, Mr. Chair. Thanks a lot. So the presentation that we just heard is the core of our responsibilities with MWAC. And so whatever else we do, we need to make sure we're complying with, to the extent we possibly can, federal standards, and we do it in a way consistent with what the federal government requires. And then in addition to that, we obviously want to try to do more. But I am interested in sort of a set of slides that would remove the Canadian wildfire element. I know you talked through them verbally, but to get a true sense of how the region is doing, it might be helpful to get some of those charts minus the Connecticut, the Canadian wildfire effect, because I think the region overall is doing a pretty good job. And unless you paid attention to the discussion, anyone picking up those charts would think that we've really dropped the ball in the last couple of years. I don't think that's true. So that's my request. Thanks a lot, Mr. Chair. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Snyder, as always. Ms. Kristen Weaver, I see that your hand is up. Please proceed.
Yeah, Kristen Weaver from City of Greenville. Just this is related more to the comment prior to Mr. Snyder's, but I think another resource to pay attention to it, in addition to some of the academic University of Maryland, is there are my day job is at NASA Goddard, and there are some researchers doing some things with air quality there, including some citizen science related projects and looking at some of the local, hyperlocal air quality monitors. So I think that's another local resource that we might be able to tie into with some of that, either preparing some of that information or even figuring out how to monitor some of those localized areas that have worse than the overall picture. So just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you, Ms. Weaver. Appreciate that. Do we have anyone else that wanted to ask any questions or make any comments before we move on? All right, so I will just wrap up by saying again, Sunil, appreciate your work as always. And for my part, I appreciate the splitting out of the different parts of the region into subregions. I think to some of the point that folks have been making, it'll allow us to more fine tune and become a little more granular in the work we're doing around seeing how things are going throughout the region, but also seeing where those pain points might be in those areas of concern that folks have been talking about. I know that, down here in Prince William County, as an example, we have a Possum Point, a coal fire plant that I know has been a concern for a number of years for some folks. So understanding that we have a ways to go, but it looks like we're, notwithstanding the Canadian fires, which is beyond our control, moving in the right direction. So again, thank you, Sunil. Next, we will move on to the fiscal year 2025 work program and budget. Jen, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you so much. So I know this is probably the presentation that everybody worked for the entire year. But so today what I'm going to be doing is reviewing the FY 2025 work program and budget. And this covers the activities that will be completed July 1 of 2024 through June 30 of 2025. So this is going to be really high level. More of the details were included in the full work program documentation that was posted on on the meeting page. So all of the details and all the deliverables were posted on there. So I hope everyone has had a chance to take a look at that. Okay, so I wanted to first go over the priorities. So here is kind of a long list of some of the priorities that are included in the work program. There's a number of priorities in here that are required that are, as Mr. Snyder said, are kind of the core activities for MWAC itself. Some of those include tracking monitor data for the different pollutants, for ozone, for fine particles in relation to determining whether or not we are meeting the national air quality standards. Within here, as well as working with members to identify different initiatives to reduce pollutants. We have reporting and reviewing and commenting on transportation conformity. But the two big ones I wanted to talk about are the first two on here. And these are really going to be the big focus of the upcoming work program and the upcoming activities for this year. And that first one is starting to work on putting together the draft or the maintenance plan and redesignation request for the 2015 ozone standard. Sunil has already gone over that. He provided a status update in his presentation. So I don't need to go over again as to kind of where we are, what our data is showing. I just want to mention that this is a big focus in the upcoming work program, and it is kind of throughout all of the main core work program areas within the work program and budget. And then the second big one I wanted to point out is developing our environmental justice action plan. As everyone knows, on this committee, MWAC approved an EJ subcommittee, and that subcommittee is going to be tasked with leading the effort of developing an environmental justice action plan this year. So that is going to be a big focus. That committee did kick off. We will be having a discussion and getting some feedback from members after this presentation here. So those are going to be the two really big main focuses on the upcoming year. So next I want to go over the funding contributions for the MWAC work program. So MWAC is funded a third from our state governments, state air agencies, a third from our local members, and then a third from the transportation agencies. And this presentation here, this table here shows what was approved in the FY 2024 budget and then what was requested in the FY 2025 budget, and then the difference. So for FY 2025, the requested amount is just over $591,000. When we compare that to the approved budget in FY 2024, it is about a 2.74% increase than the previous fiscal years. One of the things that I wanted to mention is that we have previously, starting in FY 2024 and a few years prior, we have had we've been underspending funds. So we have been utilizing those underspent funds in order to cover some of the budget increases for the state or agencies and the local member contributions. And that has been done for the last 3 fiscal years. So we've been able to hold the payments, now not the budget has been increasing, but we've been able to hold the payments steady for the last few fiscal years. Now, looking at projections for FY 2025, that is no longer going to be the case. We are not expecting any unexpended carry forward funds. In fact, we had quite a bit of carry forward funds in FY 2024 budget. MWAC approved the use of those funds to support the environmental justice subcommittee and the development of the action plan. So those funds have been dedicated. So moving forward in FY 2025, the budget has increased, and it is about an average increase of what we typically see. But also the payments for, in particular, the state air agencies and then the local members, which is through COG dues, will go up some. So just want to make sure to note that. Now, the transportation funding, they have been providing those increases every year. So just wanted to make note of that. So next we're going to move into some of the details on the core work program areas. There's 6 of them within the work program and budget. So the first slides here, I'm going to go over expenses. by each of those core work program areas. And then I'll just do a little high level of what's included in each of them. So if we can move to the next slide, we'll go over expenses by each of those core work program areas, again, broken up by the 6 main areas. And you can see here the total costs for each of them broken down by COG staff, direct costs, and then total costs. I just wanted to quickly mention that the first 3 areas here, that's where the bulk of our technical work is done. And that is about 64% of the budget. And then the last 3, the public participation, MWAC support, and project management, that makes up about 36% of the total budget. We can move on to the next slide. The next slide shows a comparison of the expenses. And this is a comparison of the approved budget in FY 2024, the requested budget in FY 2025. So you can see the difference between each of the core work program areas and where there have been changes. You can see here on the table that all of the core work program areas are seeing a bit of an increase, which makes sense since we have an increase of the overall total work program. The majority of them are roughly 3% with the exception of our regional control measures. That's about a 1% increase. So this just shows a good comparison and where the differences are. Okay, so moving through these next few slides here, I'm going to go through very, very quickly because all of the details on each of the core work program areas are included in the actual documentation in the full work program and budget document, and within that as well also has deliverables and deliverable dates in there, so it's much more inclusive. So for the first 3 work program areas, and for the emissions inventory development, for regional control measures, and then for transportation conformity, everything kind of ties back into doing the work that is needed to start the work and get going on the 2015 ozone maintenance plan and redesignation request. So this includes doing all of the necessary inventory development. It includes developing and doing all of the control measures that may be needed. Within the transportation conformity, that also includes reviewing and commenting and working with our TPB staff on the upcoming conformity analysis. So those 3 main work program areas, again, the bulk of the really big kind of technical work falls within there. Within the control measures piece, that also within there falls the support for the work that will be done for the EJ subcommittee and then also the action plan. So I'm going to move through to the slide 9 on here, which is going to be public participation, MWAC support, and then project management, which are those kind of last 3 work program areas that you see within the document, within the full documentation. So we have public participation. And within here is support for our Air and Climate Public Advisory Committee. AGPAC is also going to be working on updating their environmental justice toolkit that they originally developed a number of years ago. This work was approved by MWAC and CPC a few months ago, so staff will be working with AGPAC on that. And within the kind of the public participation, we like to have opportunities for our leadership to do outreach to leadership, but also to do some outreach to the media itself. We have different types of materials that we develop each year. Some of those could be press releases, talking points. We have an air quality dashboard that shows trends on the website. We also have various social graphics that we develop as well. So all of that kind of falls under public participation. MWAC support is essentially support for all of the committee work that we do, with the exception of AGPAC, because that is funded separately. So the executive committee, the technical advisory committee, we have a number of other different subcommittees that we have as well, doing coordination with the state air agencies. That all kind of falls under the MWAC support. And then, of course, under program management, this is where we get into kind of managing the FY 2025 work program and budget, developing the following year's work program and budget, doing all of the necessary work, the financials, the reporting. That all falls under program management. So lastly, I will wrap this up. I just wanted to do a quick overview of kind of the process that we go through to develop this work program and budget. It started a few months ago where the budget committee reviewed the draft work program and budget, and it was revised as needed based on their comments. After that, it did go to the technical advisory committee where they kind of do the official sign off for MWAQC approval. So we are here today presenting it to the full committee, and we will be asking for a vote to approve the work program. So with that, I will turn it back over to Chair Bodie for discussion and then a vote.
Thank you so much, Jen. Again, very concise, but also very detailed. I hope everyone's had a opportunity to look through the full program, the final report that was in the materials. I was just looking through it again. That said, does anyone have any questions for Jen or for staff on the budget and work plan? I'll give it everyone, since this is a pretty hefty thing, and like you said, Jen, this is the major meat of the meeting before the environmental justice part. Any questions? Anyone have any questions? All right, hearing no questions, I would like a motion to approve.
Mr. Chair, Snyder moves.
Thank you, Mr. Snyder. Do I have a second?
Colin Morrell, DOEE. I second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Burrell. We have a motion and proper second. Any further discussion before we vote? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed or abstentions? All right, the ayes have it. The motion passes and the program budget have been approved. Thank you so much, everyone. Now, on to the final and big meeting topic is the environmental justice. What would members like to see in the action plan? We'll move on to discuss the MWAQC EJ work. As you are aware, we will focus on developing an EJ action plan during this year. The EJ subcommittee, with the assistance of AECOM, will lead the development of the plan, which will address how members can consider EJ when they are implementing air quality policies, projects, and programs. Today's an opportunity to hear from our members. What are your priorities, and what would you like to see in the action plan? I know we received robust and very timely public comment at the outset of this meeting. Hope folks can continue to keep those in mind as well, even though it's been almost a couple hours now. So that said, we will hand it over to Jeff King. We'll kick off today's discussion with a brief overview of the work. AECOM will then facilitate a roundtable discussion to gather member input. Jeff, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chair Bodie, and I'll try to be quick. It looks like we're a little bit behind. So really pleased that we've started the work on the EJ subcommittee. They met on May 2nd as a kickoff, and we're already working towards getting things moving. One thing that I've observed both from seeing and listening to the public comments and just kind of thinking through a lot of this aspects is some of the things that the EJ subcommittee and MWAC are going to need to deal with cut across various issues within the whole air quality planning framework. We've already heard about monitoring and needing to understand the technical aspects of monitoring. We've heard about the process, how do we engage with the public and how do we manage our public comment process? We've heard about control measures and what we can or can't do related to control measures. So one of the things I'd like to put on the table is a concept that when I first started here way back in 2004, working with Mr. Abram from MDE at the time, the notion of having some sort of master list so that as these ideas flow in, that we can actually have a place to park them. And then I think some of the key work of the subcommittee likely should be things along the lines of really focusing in on the criteria for how to prioritize some of the ideas that come onto that master list so that we can come up with kind of a solid set of priority recommendations. And one of the first things we heard out of the subcommittee the subcommittee was the issue of let's make sure we understand COG's mission. So we'll be bringing back to the subcommittee a little bit more detailed discussion of the COG mission. As you heard earlier, one of the key aspects is MWAC was really formed to focus on the interstate regional criteria pollutant challenge and the whole state implementation plan and supporting of the states and their work. And so I think clearly that's the core mission, but they do have, in that last bullet, I think is a lot of where this EJ work will fall into, is at the request of state and locals, MWAC can perform other functions to enhance regional air quality. And I think that's much of what we're talking about here as part of the EJ work. Next slide. So in terms of the EJ subcommittee that's been established, like I said, it has kicked off in May. It is due to sunset in about a year. It's been established really to support MWAC's commitment to incorporating EJ and equity in its work program. So as I mentioned, that cuts across pretty much all of the planning framework areas. And it ultimately to develop ideas of policies and initiatives that can be prioritized for action and implementation to support its members on these things. And as a key part of the work, there's definitely a commitment to collaboratively work with stakeholders and the whole engagement with communities and others to understand what the needs are, what can be done, what should be prioritized, et cetera. And so next slide. And this shows the actual action plan deliverables. And I'm not sure, when do you want me to turn this over to AECOM? Do you know which slide gets turned over?
We can take it
So
whenever you're ready, Jeff.
Yeah, go back to that slide. I'll just hammer through these real quick. Go back. Other way. Sorry, guys. One more. There you go. So ultimately, in the near term, there's going to be an action plan technical memo. I think that's going to be really kind of digging into a lot of the technical details of this work. And certainly, as we heard already today, gaps in our understanding and knowledge. You know, a lot of this work is highly technical, regulatory, legal, process oriented. So we're going to look at that. There's going to be engagement. So like I said, we're going to need to have work with AECOM and others on the engagement aspect of this. So there's a lot of stakeholder outreach we'll need to do and ultimately figure out what that looks like and how that process will work. In the end, there'll be a draft and then a final action plan that'll happen probably in the fall, winter timeframe, and then there'll be a summary. Next slide. And so I mentioned we had a kickoff. I already mentioned the first bullet there that there was a request that we really make sure as we start this work that we understand fully how this fits into the MWAC mission. So we're definitely going to do that. Again, reiterate, we're committed to the enhanced public engagement and what that looks like, both for the EJ subcommittee process, but I think there's the question of what it looks like moving forward for MWAC and some of the other work we do. And then, you know, today is our initial engagement with the full MWAC committee. I think the purpose of today's conversation was to solicit your input on what priorities and focus areas you want to prioritize for the group. That we can take back to the subcommittee, and then clearly the commitment to receive the public comment that we had earlier in the meeting today, and we'll continue to receive. So turning it over to AECOM. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Tahira, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman Bodie. And thank you, Jeff, for the introduction. Am I able to share slide in my screen? Hopefully. I guess
no, we have your presentation up here.
Okay, good to know. Give me a second. Okay, great. So my name is Tahira. I am the project manager on the AECOM side. Really responsible for kind of pulling all of this effort together at the direction of MWAC and the subcommittee. And as I advance slides, I'll say next slide, and I'm going to skim through a bunch of this because I know that we're short on time. I live in Brentwood in Ward 5 in DC, so it was really great to hear people from my community kind of talk about the air quality issues and the need for strong, actionable direction and all of that related to air quality. In the region. So I'm happy to be a part of this team. We are here to listen and translate and then engage, incorporate feedback, and deliver this action plan to MWAC and MWCOG. I'm joined by my team at AECOM. We have, can you go back a couple slides? I'm sorry. I'm just going to wrap this up in 5 minutes. One more slide, please. Nope, I think there was a org chart with the AECOM team. Yeah, yep, okay. I just wanted to point out some of our key resources within the AECOM team. Our climate, environmental, and justice lead, as well as our air quality lead, is Leila Makias. We also have Charles Brown on the line. And Charles, Charles is with Equitable Cities and will be leading a lot of the stakeholder engagement piece and facilitating that. And I did want to take just a minute to have Charles introduce himself and his team, if that's okay. Charles, are you able to come up mute? If not, that's okay. Okay, that's fine. Okay, next slide. The order is a little bit off, but not sure of the direction. Either way, what we initially wanted to do, Jeff covered a lot of it. It was kind of like the deliverables that we had, you know, the ultimate deliverable that we have is this final action plan. And one of the main points that we wanted to make today was just that we want to hear from MWAC, the subcommittees, MWCOG, stakeholders, as well as from community groups and representatives from within the region and the communities at each step of the way. So we are initially developing, and you can pause the slides. I'll talk through it. I think we posted them online, and the order is out. We originally are starting with our stakeholder engagement strategy. So that's kind of one of the near-term deliverables that we wanted to put together, and that's basically our methodology of our initial thoughts about who we want to outreach to, how, in what capacity, about what is the purpose of that engagement. And that's before we actually go out and do it. So the thought was to receive feedback on that initial and stakeholder engagement strategy from all stakeholders before we actually do it, to make sure that we're capturing all of the groups and teams and representatives that really should have a part in this conversation. So one of the questions that I did want to pose, and we can loop back after I finish in a minute, was just with this group that we're talking to right here, right? Ideally, what we would want to do is whenever we have one of these milestone deliverables, or we're putting together a strategy, or we're putting together a draft outline of the plan, or we're consolidating draft actions for this plan, or we're reviewing the draft deliverable, we would want this type of engagement with MWAC to kind of hear thoughts live. That would be the best case scenario. The worst case scenario would be we're submitting those documents and then we're getting emails back and we're kind of piecing together everything. I know that MWAC meets quarterly, but they can put together meetings with, I think, with 10 days notice, with a quorum, of course. So that's kind of one of the questions, like, how do we want to facilitate in a timely manner getting some of those milestone deliverables reviewed before we actually go out and do things. And then once we get that engagement strategy down, we want to go out and do it. We want to put together a list of stakeholders that we want to engage with, looking at the disproportionately impacted communities related to air quality. We want to understand the data. We want to make sure that we have those voices heard, and figure out the best format and the best messaging through which we can get that feedback on these different milestones. once we execute that initial stakeholder engagement strategy, we would put together an outline of the plan that kind of incorporates all of the feedback that we've heard, get feedback to make sure that the sections and the structure of that document is kind of what everybody's looking for, and then create a draft, and then socializing that draft before it becomes finalized and making sure that there's feedback along the way. So that's kind of high level what our process is going to look like. Again, that first milestone that we're working on is that engagement strategy, the technical memo, looking at the sequencing of how we want to engage different groups, figuring out who they are, how to engage them. I want to leave the majority of the time to hear from MWAC. So I'm going to ask to skip to the slide that has a few starter questions, which is towards the end of our presentation, if that's okay. Yep. Yeah, that's the one.
And those are the same questions that Jen sent to us yesterday for the committee's benefit.
Great, awesome. And I think Jeff already kind of summarized the input that we got from the EJ subcommittee. So we'll just skip right to the questions. You know, and this is kind of what I was talking about before. Understanding the milestones that make up kind of the process of getting from now to the action plan. When would MWAC want to be engaged? We also have some ideas for how and when to engage communities, but it would be before and after. It would be either or before and after each of those milestones. The second question is, are there any community stakeholders you'd recommend engaging? And I think we had a lot of them speaking today, so we definitely would look for the public comments that were received, and we would love to use those as a starting point, but if there's any more, please feel free to speak up. Do you have any recommendations on how to equitably engage those partners in, that are impacted or interested in this action plan? What has worked, what hasn't worked? And then what are the best sources of air? Apologies for that spilling, but air quality data forecasts and plans. We noticed on the MWAQC environment website, under planning areas, there's an air quality site that contains a lot of the most recent data. That was going to be our starting point. But if there's anything outside of that, we definitely want to make sure that we are all on the same page with the starting point that we're using as the baseline for the who we're looking to reach. So I'll pause there, and hopefully this can be kind of like an exchange of dialogue.
Tahira, this is Charles. I'm here now. I've been given permission to speak. Pleasure to meet everyone.
So folks are abiding by the hand raising policy. Appreciate that. John Morrill, I saw your hand first, and then David.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is John Morrill from Fairfax County. I'm jumping to question 4. And first I want to acknowledge Jeff King's remarks on the role of COG in this, and you're in a sticky position because environmental justice is really a local topic. It's kind of a very hyper-local environmental issue, but air quality monitoring and regulation is administered at the state level. And so the region is cut in between. But I went to the link that you've listed here, and I found six monitoring sites that I could easily identify as being in Fairfax County, and only 2 of them had recent data. And I don't know if, and I was thinking that the 6 as a whole is a nice distribution across the county, but the 2 that I could get data from are on opposite sides of the county and not particularly representative of the whole county, or even, you know, it leaves some important areas out. So I think starting from a good base of data is going to be very, very helpful for identifying the situations that the public comment remarks we're speaking of, and that there are some pretty local areas that are compromised, and so we need to be able to identify them. And I know that we in Fairfax, for both our climate mitigation and environmental justice and equity work, we do a lot of mapping, and we're mapping and overlaying areas so that we have a good handle on what the conditions are at a fairly hyperlocal basis, except for air quality. And so, you know, we live in this very broad airshed, but local air quality can still be much more granular. And so if Mr. Ballou is on from DEQ, if sorry to put you on the spot, but I don't know if you can speak to the current status of various air quality monitors in Northern Virginia, or just to help characterize how granular can we get. Thank you.
Well, I did raise my hand. This is Tom Ballou from Virginia DEQ.
Before
John, I got your comment. I did not hear where you were looking at when you found the data for Fairfax County, but I'm about to drop in a link to the DEQ air monitoring page that has real-time data for all of our monitors. So that is, it may be whatever link you were looking at doesn't have all that updated data, but we do have all of our monitoring data online. And I would go back to the earlier discussion about the difference between regional monitoring, which is what DEQ does in our network, and these hyper local types of issues. The monitoring network we have set up is for looking at regional air quality for regional pollutants like ozone and fine particulate matter. It's not designed to, nor can it accommodate looking at, you know, all the individual local situations, hotspots, whatever you want to call them, that would be out there. So that's really something that has to be accomplished through other means, like the types of extracurricular monitoring activities that are going on outside of what we do normally for our air quality compliance purposes.
And Chair Bodie, I don't have the ability to put the hand up, but if I can make a comment, let me know.
Go for it.
So earlier today on the CPC call, we had, I had given an update on the work of the EJ, just very briefly to CPC, and EPA Region 3 was on the call. They had mentioned their strong interest in places like Ivy City and the hyperlocal air issues there, and in Cheverly and the like, and said that they've actually launched a new EPA level hyper-regional, hyper-local monitoring initiative. So I'd venture to say we should probably invite someone from EPA to the next EJ subcommittee, or maybe an offline conversation to chat with EPA about their interest in this, I guess, what did you just say, extracurricular monitoring? And for instance, I think I noticed in the website that jumps out at me when I look at question 4 is Air Now Tech. You know, we as staff have access to the Air Now Tech database, which is all monitors in the entire country. But I noticed recently that Air Now seems to also now start displaying the purple monitors and some of the non-federal regulatory monitors. And I'd venture to say that if there was a site that could be considered perhaps the most ideal site to work off of, might be something like Air Now. Just a thought.
Understood. And I do like the idea of both the offline conversation and having EPA come to a EJ subcommittee. I'm not the chair of EJ subcommittee, but for my part as chair of the overall MWAC, I think that those are both good ideas. And if they do have an initiative that's looking at hyper local monitoring like we've been discussing, I think that's a key component of the conversation. So I appreciate that. Dave, I think you were next.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, did you mean to call on me, Snyder? Is that?
Yes,
Okay,
Dave
thanks.
Snyder.
Thanks.
Yes, go for it.
Okay, thanks. I like where we're going. I think though we need to be mindful of two things. One, that there may be a certain set of monitors we need to do for regional compliance with the federal requirements, and then what additional we want to do in terms of more hyper-local monitoring. And I was impressed with the speakers that we've heard from today that have given me a lot of great ideas about how we ought to move forward. Certainly, we ought to study the Cheverly program to determine what might be usable, perhaps as recommendations region-wide. So I just wanted to thank all the speakers. I learned a lot. I think we have a lot more to learn, and maybe we ought to have folks representing that group talk about what it is they do, and so that we can dig into that in more depth to see if in fact it does offer a model or a more regional rollout. And then though, I don't want to lose sight of compliance with federal requirements, because a lot of bad things can happen if we fall out of compliance with federal requirements. So I want to make sure that we're doing our core even as we move forward with the environmental justice work, and look at hyper monitoring and the Cheverly experience to determine how much of that might be useful on a regional level. Thanks a lot for the opportunity to make these comments. I appreciate all the input so far.
Thank you, Committee Member Snyder. Appreciate your input as always. I'm not seeing any other hands, but I'm sure with all the folks that we have on here, some folks have some input to give. Because remember, folks, this is our first opportunity here to give the folks at AECOM and COG staff some inputs here on what we want to see of this process. And there are some good questions that Jen and AECOM came up for us. So please raise your hands and weigh in on where you would like to go with this process. All right, go for it, Miss Weaver. You're up.
Yeah, I guess I would just add that thinking about, we heard a lot of mention of some of the citizens thing like this, especially with environmental justice. It's just really important to get the community engaged as much as possible. And I think that was reflected in some of the comments earlier. So I just like to echo that. I think it's mentioned there, but I think especially for some of these issues, we don't want it to be top down completely. We need to get the input from the people who are on the ground, whose lives are being affected by some of these issues. So not particularly, I just want to emphasize that thought.
Yep, no, and echo those comments 100%. I know that that's something we talked about quite a bit in the EJ subcommittee as well when we had this conversation. It's a dilemma we have because we know that the folks who are most impacted by these issues have the least means and the least expendable free time to participate in something like this. So however we can to make sure that, and I think we talked about a little bit at EJ subcommittee, being as broad base as possible and as cross form and cross platform as possible with our outreach, with our meeting people where they are on the streets level, and making sure that all of our communications and our engagement can reach as many people on the ground as possible. So this can be a really stakeholder and ground level driven process. I think will serve us well. And it sounds to me like the folks over at Cheverly have some ideas on how to get that done. Seems like they're all quite organized over there, so maybe they have some insight to share with us in another meeting on how we can make sure we're engaging all voices in all parts of the region from the ground level up. So 100% agreed.
It may take some creativity in how we do some of that and thinking about some out of the box ways than sort of some of the usual methods.
Agreed 100%. Roger, I see your hand is up. Please proceed.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I just have a quick question. At what point in this process are local government land use officials brought in, or are they not?
Good question. I think that's a great question for COG staff / AECOM to answer based on their thoughts at the outset.
And can I ask who asked the question? Because we don't have the screen up here, so I couldn't.
This was Roger Thinnell of MDE.
Oh, Roger. For some reason I heard Robert. So Roger, good point. This comes at an interesting challenge for us here at COG, in that our Director of Community Planning and Services, who was the lead staff for the Planning Director's Technical Committee and Region Forward, just retired like weeks ago. So staff are taking over that work. So clearly COG has the linkage to the planning directors and that group. We have not yet engaged internally here at COG to think through exactly what process we want to use for that engagement. I think we can make it happen. Part of it, I suppose, relates to what AECOM and the subcommittee comes up with in terms of how they want to stack and rack the actual work over the course of the year. If they want to front load, monitor, understanding the monitors and the science, and deal with the control work later, or do each meeting they want to do monitors, public engagement process, land use issues. We have to figure out which issues we're going to tackle when. From the experience over the last year or two, I can say that there's definitely at the COG level concerns that COG does not want to be put in a situation where it is starting to adjudicate local land use issues, particularly between our members, and that we need to respect the fact that land use decisions are local decisions. Having said that, we certainly probably have the ability to impact how the planning directors think about their work and what they do, and elevate and enhance the thinking along these lines. What that looks like internally here is going to be impacted for sure by whoever takes over Paul's job moving forward as the director of that group here at COG. So that's my initial reaction, Roger.
Appreciate that. And then I would just piggyback off of that and say that I think the planning director, them being stakeholders, is a good point. I also think that the sustainability / environmental directors, or their like counterparts in each one of our jurisdictions, would also be good folks to engage as well. I know that some of the other committees in COG engage them quite often. That said, Tom Denoga, you're up.
Thank you. In terms of public engagement, I would note, Cheverly has a great turnout. Love the folks in Cheverly. But as you were saying, in terms of other folks, there's a DC Environmental Justice Coalition. And obviously they've submitted comments and they're very active. And looking at the comments we've received, the coalition includes the DC Asthma Coalition, Empower DC, University of Maryland Center for Community Engagement, and another organization, to campaign to reduce lead exposure and asthma. So there's definitely folks beyond our good friends at Cheverly that have expressed interest and written to us. And one of the things that has been requested is that the Environmental Justice Subcommittee provide for a public comment period at each of its meetings. And I assume we were going to do that, but I think we should make it clear that we're going to do that. Thank you.
Yep. Agreed. Appreciate that, Tom, and I agree 100%. That said, we have about 3 or 4 minutes, depending on what clock you're looking at. I will just weigh in very quickly. Tahira mentioned it, as MWAC, we meet, I wouldn't say frequently per se, we don't meet every month, we meet close to quarterly or so. I think that's a little too infrequent based on the work that is being done here So I think that we should probably look into meeting a little bit more frequently than that, especially in the early stages, especially as we begin to get some stakeholder feedback, just to see where things are going and how things are going, if we need to adjust the overall strategy. So that's my 2 cents on milestones and how frequent we want to meet on this. Um, Community stakeholders were recommended engaging. I think, Tom, you made a very good point just now that although we had only a couple of different groups represented in the actual spoken public comment time today, there are a whole swath of folks who have written into us that we have their written comments. So I would say at the bare bones, us engaging with all those folks, and as I said earlier, learning from them not only what they believe, but also how they think we might be able to be best served in engaging their groups and the folks that they may make up, as well as other constituencies they may not represent directly, but they may have some synergies with. So I'd say let's do that as well. I think that having constituencies of different interest groups and different demographics would be good. We heard quite a bit from the speakers earlier today about children who go outside during school hours and what have you. So I think engaging the youth is important. I think engaging our aging community is as well a good one. So I think those are stakeholder groups we should be looking at in terms of equitably engaging partners. Folks have already said it, saying the sort of old school top down approach and being too prescriptive and too command and control heavy, I think hasn't worked. And I think what has worked is when we're even able to get grassroots folks to help not only engage, but be validators for other folks to engage us as well. So I think engaging our grassroots groups, we've talked about them quite a bit during this meeting, I think will be key, and empowering them to have people then speak before us at those EJ subcommittee meetings as well. I will let COG staff handle that number 4 question, the data, and I think that's been placed in the chat as well. That's my 2 cents. I know we only have a couple minutes left. Before we close out this discussion on the EJ work, does anyone else have any parting thoughts for ECOM and for COG staff? All right, it seems like for the moment anyway, all hearts and minds are clear. Understand that again, this is the very beginning of this process. We will definitely have opportunities to sort of huddle back up as both the EJ subcommittee and overall MWAC to tweak as we need to and give AECOM and COG staff additional feedback. But I appreciate this conversation, everyone. I know due to time constraints, this was a little bit more shortened than we would have liked, but I appreciate everyone's efforts here. That's all, folks, for this May 22nd, 2024 meeting. We will now adjourn, and the next MWAC meeting will be scheduled for September 25th. Again, I think we need to have some more conversations around maybe meeting a little bit more frequently based on how the EJ work and AECOM's work continues on now that we're at the beginning of this process. But thanks to everyone for participating. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Snyder move.
Thank you, Snyder. Do I have a second for adjournment?
Yeah, there was a second here in the room.
Okay, appreciate that. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you so much, everyone. Enjoy the warm weather before it gets too hot, and we will see everyone in a few months. This meeting is adjourned.